Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for the third lesson. I know you're all excited after you've done the if work, and hopefully you're feeling pretty confident in the structure of that. We wanted to start this one with a little warm-up. We're going to use the if, and then we're going to get into some other functions that kind of use similar logic. As always, we're just giving you a preview of the kind of tools that you can use in Excel. There are lots of other resources available, but this is really core to how we leverage it here, at WCM. Hopefully we haven't lost you yet, but we're going to get started. So I want to start with a warm-up here. We have a request to report the number of Swiss securities in our FGI portfolio at each year end, 2013, 14, and 15. In columns M, N, and O of the FGI tab, so down here, there's this tab M, M, and O. I want to flag if the country in column J is Switzerland and the date in column G is one of the dates listed. So I want to know if this date is this date and if this is Switzerland. So the way we're going to write that is an AND statement inside of an if. So how we start is we say if, and this is and what I want to do is say, the order of this doesn't matter, you can do date first or country first, but let's do this country, and we're going to have to lock the J, because when we paste right, we want it to stay in the country column. So if that equals Switzerland, comma, what's the second part of the and? That is that the date in G, and we want to lock the G, is equal to the date up here. In this case, we want to lock the 1, because as we paste to the right, we want M to go to N and O, but we want the 1 to stay there, because that's where our date reference is always going to be. So that's the end of our AND statement. So if both of those are true, then give me the weight. And again, we want to lock the H because we're going to paste this to the right, and we want it to always give us the weight column. Otherwise, give us nothing. So if you've done this right, you can go to the bottom, control down on the array of data, control shift up, paste, and they're all green. And then if you've done it right, these are all green, and it gives you the weights. So this is kind of a clunky way to do this. The functions that we're about to get into use sum functions and count functions along with ifs to give you these similar results. So you see you can do it with the if and statement, but as we do this lesson, you'll learn kind of other ways to solve the same problem. So as we work down this list, there are basic functions, some single if criteria, which we're not going to use a ton, and then multi, but let's just get started. So the count function, and you just write equals count. What it does is it counts all numerical values in an array. So in this case, I'm saying count N8 to N40, so that's this set of data. You can see the count down here too. It says 33, but the count function gives you 33. It says there's 33 values in that column. Count A counts anything that's not blank. So in this case, we have some non-US securities that don't have a CUSIP. So they have a CEDL and then they have a blank here. So if you count the non-blanks, you can see here, it gives you a preview, there's 15 of them. But the count A gives you non-blanks. Now if you want to count blanks instead, there's count blank as a function. So there were 33 of these total, so you could either do the count minus count A, which would also be 18, or the count blank, which gives you 18. If you sum, the sum is a simple addition of all numbers in an array. So if we sum up all the weights, if it makes sense for the total portfolio, the sum is going to be 100%. Again, you can preview it down here, but the sum function gives you 100%. So it's the sum of all the values. If I sum up all these, it's going to look like a funny date, but remember all dates have a numeric value, so this is really going to be, you know, because there's 33 of them and we're in the 40,000s, it's 1.3 million or something. It doesn't really make sense for a date, but it's just to highlight that these are also numbers that can be summed. An average that computes the mean of numerical values in an array. So if you think about there's 33 holdings and their total weight is going to be 100%, that the average weight is just over 3%. So those functions in themselves have quite a few uses. The other ones that are cool for kind of summarizing data is the COUNTIF, SumIf, and AVERAGEIF. So you can do this singularly, which is what this first section highlights. It's a single criteria, so you can say it'll count all the numerical values in an array that meet a single criteria. So in this case, we're going to just say count if the sector here is equal to information technology. You see when I highlight all these, the count's 33. But if I count just infotech, and if I highlight these, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 information technology names. So the way to get just the count of those is you write equals COUNTIF, and then your data range, and then your criteria is information technology. Now what you can do is also say SumIf. So you can't sum information technology in itself, but what I could do is I can say, hey, I want to sum the weights if the sector is information technology. So the way we structure that, and SumIf says, okay, equals SumIf, and then I pick the range, and I say if that's information technology, then give me the sum of these. So it looks like this, equals SumIf, the criteria range, the criteria, and then the sum range. So when I'm writing here, this will show me in the function. Range is referring to the criteria range. Criteria is the test or the equality, and then sum range is what you're going to add up. So in this case, I'm adding up everything in N, which is the weights, when Q is equal to information technology. So if I did this manually, I'd say, okay, this, and this. So these 6 you can see down here, the sum of that is 18.84, but that's also what this function gives us. The AVERAGEIF is going to be the mean of those weights. So it's similar to SumIf. You're going to pick the criteria range, then the criteria, and then the average range. Finish the single criteria if. One that's more powerful and can really replace the single criteria is multiple criteria. Whether it's 1 or 5 criteria, we can use the ifs function. So in this case, we're going to look through the COUNTIFs, SumIfs, and AVERAGEIFs. But in this case, instead of saying just information technology, I can say, what if the sector is information technology and this label for emerging or developed is emerging markets? I could also do and the ticker is something. Whatever amount of criteria I want, I can use the ifs function. So in this case, let's walk through the count, sum, and average if the securities are both information technology securities and EM. So when I look at these, I see there's 3 of them. These ones up here are all DM. There are 3 Infotech EM names. It's TSM, Tencent, and Yandex. So in this case, we can see the count is 3. It's these 3. And if I were summing the weight, it would be 10.72. And the average, you could either divide the sum by the count, or you can do an average ifs. But let's walk through how we get this. So you can say the COUNTIFs, and then what it's going to ask for first is the first criteria range. These don't, it doesn't matter which order. You could do EM first, you could do sector first. So in this case, we say the sector Q is equal to information technology. And then the second criteria range is O, and that's equal to EM. So when I have this as a function that's working, it'll show you highlighted, see blue, and then this is red, and it goes through different colors for all the different criteria range you're going to use. So the COUNTIFs will get you 3, the SumIfs will get you the sum of the 3 of their weights, 10.72%, and the average ifs is going to be the average weight among those 3. This, again, because it can be used for either single or multiple criteria, you could strike all of these from your arsenal if you just had these. They're more powerful. They have a slightly different structure. So in SumIf's case, what they want first is the sum range, and then criteria range 1, criteria 1, criteria range 2, criteria 2, and it goes on indefinitely. The sum range in the SumIf function up here, the sum range is actually at the end. So I would suggest focusing on these 3, and even if it's only one criteria, continue to use ifs. It's useful to know that these exist, but I would focus on these and the structure of this one, which always includes the sum range or the average range first, followed by the criteria. So what we showed is all based on equality. So we said, hey, that this sector is information technology and this is EM. You could also do not equal to. So I could say, hey, I need to know the securities that are not information technology, and I could sum those up. So if I want to do not equal, I can incorporate those operators into the SumIfs or COUNTIFs or average ifs functions. And the way to do it, by default, without an operator, is equal to. But if you want to say not equal to, so in this case, I say SumIfs n, so I'm doing the weights again, and I'm saying that O, this one is equal to DM, because I have O, and then I have DM, I don't have any operator, and then I'm saying Q8 to Q40, which is here, and I'm saying is not equal to Q14, which Q14 up here is consumer discretionary. So what this is saying is it's saying I want the sum of the weights where the names are DM names, but not consumer discretionary. And so the sum of that is 68.61. You could do greater than. So if I said, hey, I only want, in this case, securities with, oh, I'm hiding R. I'm going to unhide it. With a price that's greater than $19.23. So in this case, I'm using the price range in R, and then greater than 1923. So there are a few names that the price is lower than that, and they would be excluded. This one, this one. This one would also be excluded because it has the same exact price. So in this case, we do greater than 1923, this would be excluded. But if we do greater than or equal to, which we do here, then you would incorporate this weight, which is 1.87. So you can see the difference between these two is going to be that 1.87%. So you can do greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal to, and you can incorporate all of those into your SumIfs or COUNTIFs or average ifs functions. So now let's start to do some exercises. The first one we want you to work on is to calculate the following for all securities between two dates listed in the Holdings tab. The holdings need to meet the following criteria. The dates are greater than the first date and less than or equal to the second date, and the securities are not cash. So let's walk through how we would write this. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to say the COUNTIFs, because I want to count the dates greater than this date and less than or equal to this date, and that they aren't cash. So let's COUNTIFs, and we're going to do the criteria range. Let's do the date first. So the date column is G. And what I can do is say greater than or equal to. And what we have to do is put the operator in quotes and then include an ampersand, which will link it with our criteria. So let's point to this. Comma. And now I need to do the date column again. So we used G already, but you can use it again for the less than. So it doesn't have to be different columns. In this case, we have greater than or equal to and a less than, but it's the same reference column. It'll still refine that range. So then this is, and then in quotes, less than, ampersand, P49. So if I just did those two, it would do the sum, and let's look at that really quick. So that's saying there's 32 securities in this date range. So if I say less than or equal to this date, it should exclude January 31st, 2015, but it'll include 12/31/14. So it should just be the count of the securities, all of them, on that date. So if you look at the count down here, it's 32. That makes sense. Now, what I want to do lastly is exclude cash. So what I can do is I can say I'll come in here and I'm going to add my third criteria. My third criteria is that the ticker column, and then I'm going to say not equal to ampersand, and we call it cash underscore USD. So now it's 31 because there's one cash entry. It went from 32 to 31. Okay, so now let's say I want to do this for the sum instead of just the count. I can take the same structure. Let's walk through it from the beginning. So now I want to do the weights. So SumIfs. And so the weight column is what I do first because I have to do my sum range first. Now the criteria range, the first range is the date, and I want that to be greater than or equal to, and this date, comma, the same date column, comma, is less than, and this, and then the security is not equal to, and cash underscore USD. The case doesn't actually matter, but just so you can follow. So that says that my weight of non-cash securities in December 31st, 2014 is 95.31. So if I want to look at that, I should expect the cash weight in December to be 4.69%. And that's what we can look here and see, yes, it was 4.69% on that month. So that number does make sense. The average ifs is going to be the same function, so let's just copy this and we're going to change sum to average. What's it matter? So then this is the same as this divided by this. 3.07. Okay, so that was the exercise in getting weights. We can change these dates, and we may not be as interested. This is where, you know, it might be interesting to know what your average cash weight is, or your average security weight. So if I extend this and let's bring it out a whole year, these counts don't really mean anything. So you had 365 names over 12 months, and the total weight of the securities is, it's going to sum everything in this date range. So you might be more interested in the average here. So the average equity weight over the year is 3.16%. Let's go down to an or. So we talked about and in our last lesson. These SumIfs, COUNTIFs, and AverageIfs, they're all incorporating and. So we are saying, hey, that this column is information technology, and this column is EM or DM, and this date is a certain date. Whatever it is, it's an and. If you want to do an or, so if you said, hey, I want to know if it's China or Taiwan in the country, the only real way to do that is to add those things together. So you would add the count of China plus the count of Taiwan. So for the or, you're going to have to do it twice, because nobody's country is China and Taiwan itself, and you can't sum China and also sum Taiwan at the same time. So if you want to sum those with multiple criteria with an or, you're going to have to add them together. So let's talk about that. So in this case, let's say, okay, let's count ifs, and then our country here, comma, China. So there's two, oh, and we say and our security, the portfolio weight for the security is greater than 3%. So let's incorporate that. So we're going to say the weight column, comma, it's greater than and 3%. So there's two securities greater than 3% in China. I can take this same one, and if I lock this range, I can just paste it down and then change China to Taiwan. And it says, okay, there's two names in China above 3%. and one name in Taiwan above 3%. So if I look at my China, let's just look at the data and see if that makes sense. So this China name is above 3%, this China name's above 3%, and this one's above 3% too. So these are the three names. The sum of it's actually 1240. So if I said, hey, I want to know the total count, you're going to have to add these two together. So because you can't do China or Taiwan, you can just say, you can take this piece and this piece and say this equals that plus the Taiwan one. So both of them are in there, and they get you 3. So that's it for COUNTIF, COUNTIFs, SumIf, SumIfs, count. We have a lot of fun exercises in this one. As you go through them, if you have questions, you should be able to see when you have the correct answer. It'll tell you. There's some bonus ones that are particularly hard here. But if you have questions on it, feel free to reach out. I look forward to hearing back from you. Thanks for joining.